Okay, a couple of weeks ago, we looked at the rich young ruler. We looked at that study, and you may recall, the apostle got was shocked that the rich man couldn't get into heaven. Peter says, well, what about us? We give up everything. What about us? And so, in following up with that, Jesus gives another parable. We're going to look at Matthew chapter 20. If you look at Matthew chapter 20, we're going to be looking at in a moment. It is a book titled Discovering the Pearls of Great Price. Elder Eccles tells this story. There was a mission school in Africa, and you could tell some of the kids were from very poor families. You could tell the way they dressed. They had just basically rags, and some of the other children were from more affluent families because you could tell the way they dressed. They had more nicer clothes on. So the missionaries said, we need to try to get a uniform so that everybody has the same shirt, same shorts, and everything. Everybody be the same in terms of appearance. And the local tailor said he would do that. And they didn't tell the children what they were doing, and so the tailor makes a shirt and shorts for all the kids, but for some reason he put pockets on 2/3 of the shorts, didn't put pockets on 1/3 of the shorts. And so he gets them made, and they brings them to school, and they start to distribute those clothes, and the kids are all excited and happy, and they tell them, take them home and try it on, and you'll be wearing those to school each day. And the next day, or shortly thereafter, 1/3 of the students show up. Some of the missionaries, they're upset, and they're complaining and grumbling. You can imagine why. Their shorts didn't have pockets on them. They realized in talking to their buddies that some they had pockets. They didn't have pockets. They're very upset. And so they've gone from being ecstatic and happy that they've got nice clothes to wear to now they're upset because they didn't have pockets. And the missionary said, well, what did you pay for those? And of course, they paid nothing for them. And he said, how can you possibly been cheated since you didn't pay anything? You received a free gift. Why be upset because somebody else got more than you did? And I read that story and some time ago, but I thought it applies to what we're going to look at today. And also, I thought of this. We see people athletes in sports sign a contract. And the time they sign that contract, it's the richest contract in history. And they're all happy about that. They're happy. They get paid millions. They're happy with it. Until what? A couple years later, maybe 3 years later, somebody else that plays the same position they do signs a contract and makes more money. And now all of a sudden, they want to renegotiate. They want to hold out because it's not fair. Again, I think it's one thing we're going to see in today's text. So let's read today's text. We'll talk about it. And then we'll see what lessons there for us. I'll read again from Matthew 20, beginning in verse 1. For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire laborers for his vineyard. When he had agreed with the laborers for a denarius for the day, he sent them into his vineyard. And he went out about the 3rd hour and saw others standing idle in the marketplace. And to those he said, you also go into the vineyard, and whatever is right I will give you. And so they went. Again he went out about the 6th and the 9th hour and did the same thing. And about the 11th hour, he went out and found others standing around, and he said to them, why have you been standing here idle all day long? They said to him, because no one hired us. He said to them, you go into the vineyard too. When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his foreman, call the laborers and pay them their wages, beginning with the last group to the first. When those hired about the 11th hour came, each one received a denarius. When those hired first came, they thought they would receive more. But each of them also received a denarius. When they received it, they grumbled at the landowner, saying, these last men have worked only 1 hour. You have made them equal to us who have borne the burden and the scorching heat of the day. But he answered and said to one of them, friend, I'm doing you no wrong. Did you not agree with me for a denarius? Take what is yours and go, but I wish to give to this last man the same as to you. Is it not lawful for me to do what I wish with what is my own? Or is your eye envious because I am generous? So the last shall be first and the first last. Okay, let's talk about what we just read. A denarius. At the time, that was sort of the going rate for a day's labor. It's what the Roman soldiers, I understand, made per day. But that was a day's rate for a laborer. And so the men looking for work kind of gathered the market, and then the people won't work, that want workers rather, go get those. And I've never had a vineyard, but I understand it's very labor intensive, or at least it was at the time that we're reading about here. Very labor intensive, and so it required additional help. And so this landowner goes out at 6 a.m. Goes out at 6 a.m., hires workers, but they negotiate with them about what they're going to be paid. Because it says they agreed. They agreed with the laborers, what my version says. But these workers agreed. They get paid a denarius for a day's work. A day's work from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. The landowner goes back to the market at 9 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 5 o'clock. So he makes 5 trips to the marketplace. Each time hires workers. The last, of course, work only an hour. He hired them at 5, and the day is over at 6. So, again, 5 trips he makes to hires people. Now, let's look at the first group he hires for just a moment. How did the first group of people hired differ from the other 4 groups? How did the first group differ from the rest of them?
Well, they were anxious to get some work.
They were anxious to get to work. Absolutely. How does it differ, though? I touched on that briefly already. They agreed, yes. They negotiated, if you will, the price. What did the other 4 groups do? Did they negotiate? Did they negotiate? The other 4 groups, what were they to be paid?
Whatever was right.
Whatever was right. Whatever was fair. First group says, we'll work for you all day, but we won't be paid a denarius. And he agrees. The rest of them, they're wanting to work too. They're anxious to work. He just says, I'll pay you what's right. And they're good with that. So they're going out to work, have no idea what they're going to get paid. None. But they're trusting that the landowner's going to do what's right, going to do what's fair. And it's important that, there's no indication from this story, at least, that the the landowner wouldn't have given more if they'd asked for more. First group. First group back, they agreed to that one denarius, but they may have agreed, he may have paid more, we don't know. They didn't apparently ask. This is the important part I think to me is, they obviously weren't dissatisfied with that, because they agreed to it. They agreed to it, and there's no indication that they did not do what they said. There's nothing in here that says that they didn't go out and give a full day's work, just like they said they would. 12 hours of work. They did what they said they were going to do. Let's look at the other four groups. Again, they did not make a demand, as we talked about, and they trusted that the landowner would do what was fair to them. So if the first group was paid what they had agreed to work for, if the landowner paid them for what he said he would pay them, why do we see in verse 10, why were they upset? The first group says, we'll work a day for a denarius, and they get paid the denarius. Why are they upset? He did what he said. Why are they upset? Yeah, because they watched the people that worked 1 hour. They'd work 12. They watched the people work 1 hour get paid how much? A denarius. And so they're thinking, hey, if these guys get paid a denarius, working an hour, we're going to get paid what we thought we were. Why? Oh, because that's right. That's only fair in their eyes, right at that point. They were okay with the denarius at the beginning, but now it's not okay. Now it's not fair. And why is it not fair? Because, as John said, we tend to compare ourselves. And they were comparing themselves to what the other people had made. And not only did the others get paid more, but that first group, they say, look, we've done most of the work, we've carried the burden, first group says, we've done most of the work, and we were working in the heat of the day. So if we've done more of the work and we work in the heat of the day, in their minds at that point means we should get paid more. Now, had the landowner paid the first group first, and then receive their denarius, chances are what? They leave and they're happy. They got what they said they would get. But I suspect it'd be like those children in the shores. Once they found out that the other group got paid the same as they did, they'd still be upset at that point. So whether they got paid first or whether they got paid last, as soon as they find out that they're getting paid the same as these others, they're going to be upset. Let's look at the context of who Jesus is talking to, and then we'll come back and see. I think first you're trying to teach some lessons here to the listeners, but also I think you're teaching us as well. Who's this parable meant for? Who's he intended this parable to?
Kind of talking to the apostles, isn't he?
Well, I'm not sure. I don't think so. And he is talking to them because they're going to get the same lesson as we are. But I think in this parable, the workers, first group of workers, the second group of workers represent two different sets of people. I should say the first group and the second through fifth group represents different folks. Let's talk about the landowner. Who's the landowner represent? God, Jesus, yes.
The latecomers are the high-tech, the latecomers that come into the kingdom.
Yep, you're right. So, the first group of workers are who? Somebody said it. The Jews, yeah, the Jews. The Jews. And let's face it, the Jews had for 15 centuries or so, whatever it works out to be, I think they're on the numbers, but they maintained, or some had maintained a relationship with God. They were His chosen people. They were there first. They had tithed their possessions. They had observed all the laws and feasts and holy days and tried to keep all the law, I should say, I guess. But they considered themselves to be, and God did too. They were the chosen people. They saw them not only first in line, they probably saw themselves as the only in line, but the thought to them that you got this other groups, and I think these others are the Gentiles, or possibly even these Jews. It could be any poor person, whether Jewish or not, Jewish or Gentile, but certainly any Gentile, they thinking, wait a minute, we've been here all along. We've been here all along. We are entitled. We are entitled to get in. These other folks, maybe not so. Now, I said entitled because the Jews thought they had what? They looked at heaven as being what? Something that they had earned. Thank you. Earned. Something they had earned. Something they had earned. And they saw these others as being unworthy because they hadn't earned it. And now for them to think that the Gentiles, the Samaritans, were going to share the same heaven with them, is just more than they could tolerate. They couldn't stand the thought of that. And many Jews reject that idea altogether. Gentiles could be in heaven. Some didn't, but many did. So what's the meaning of the parable itself? If Christ, if the landowner represents Christ, or God, what did he do each time, each group? What did he do each time? What did the landowner do each time?
He offered them all the same thing. The job.
The job, but before we get to that point, what did he do? He went to them. He was seeking workers, so he goes to them. He doesn't get word out on the street, hey, I need people to come work for me. He goes to where they are and offers them a job. All of them needed work. That's why they're there to begin with. They needed work. They wanted work. But he goes to them. In Luke 19, verse 10 says, Jesus said that the Son of Man came to seek and to save what was lost. see that, God's order of priority, preaching the gospel is first to the Jew, then to the Gentiles. First the Jews, and then the Gentiles. All right, so what lessons do we take from this parable? What lessons are there for us from this story?
I think if someone is looking for God, if you're there waiting for him and looking for him, he's going to find you and show you how to get to him.
Yeah. Did y'all hear that? Cassie said if somebody searches for God, God's going to make a way to get that person where he needs to be. Okay? What else?
Maybe we need to work as the Bible tells us to instead of the example these workers here have given us.
All right.
Colossians 3:23.
Go ahead, keep expounding.
Whatever you do, work at it with all of your heart, as working for the Lord, not for human master.
Yep, excellent. What else?
Well, I think a lot of times in the church, a lot of the folks that have been in church all their life want to sit back and let the younger people or the new ones do all the work. I've already done my work,
Boy, isn't that true? And particularly, I'm at that age now, although I haven't yet retired, but particularly those who retire from work, think they also can retire from doing the work in the church for the reason that Les just said. Well, I spent 15 years doing that, let somebody else do it. Or I spent 50 years doing that, let somebody else do it. Be careful what Larry just read. It didn't say anything about time limit, did it, Larry? It didn't say anything about a time limit, what you just read from Colossians there, did it? We had to work that way all along, all the time. What else?
I think we need to learn to be happy with what we got too, and not always be envious of what other people are getting.
Amen. There are people in this county who have been very successful business people, done very well for themselves. Started out with basically nothing and did very well for themselves. And it's amazing to me all along how people want to knock them down or criticize them or talk about them about whatever. Because we're envious. Somebody said a little more, us we're envious. But we have to be satisfied with what we have. And not worry about. Not only not worry about what somebody else has got, we should do what? If somebody does well, we should do what? Be proud for them. Be happy for them. Which leads some, to another is we must share the grace. This lesson here, to me, the main lesson from this is none of these workers earned what they got. Now you can say, well, no, wait a minute, that first group worked the whole 12 hours. That's what they agreed to. Okay, maybe. But certainly the second, third, fourth, and fifth groups, they didn't earn full day's pay because they didn't work a full day. But the owner wanted to be generous with them. He chose to be generous with them. Think about and sometimes but you think of it in this context, hope we don't struggle with this, maybe we do. Someone who's been a Christian their entire lives, they're faithful as they can, dedicated, work. What's their reward going to be? eternity in heaven, right? Somebody that becomes a Christian 50, 60, 70, 80 years into their lives, and they remain faithful, what's their reward going to be? Same, isn't it? So you can look at that and say, well, that's not right. That's not fair. They got to do what they wanted to for 50, 60 years, but now they get the same reward as I am. If we thinking like that, boy, this parable for you. But we must share grace. God shares His grace to us because none of us would get to heaven without God. He shares that grace with us. We should share that grace to others.
I think we need to ask ourselves, okay, why are we doing what we're doing?
Yep. Go ahead and expound on that.
Well, if you're doing it to earn a bigger reward in heaven, you're certainly doing it for the wrong reason.
Absolutely. Because you should be doing it for what reason? In response to the grace that God's given to you, you do the works. It's in response to the grace that God's given to us is why we do the works. You know, y'all know how I love talking about grace. I'm not going to try to get on too much of a tangent, but I think it's one of the lessons here. We don't earn our way. There's not enough work I can do. As James says, faith without works is what? Dead. Somebody says it's like a burning lamp that cannot exist without giving off light. With no light, the lamp's empty. That's who we us. As Christians, we should be giving off the light. We should be sharing. We should be doing the works in response to God's grace. Ephesians chapter 2, I guess it's a good point to read this anyway. Ephesians chapter 2, verses 8 through 10. It reads, "For by grace you have been saved through faith, and that not of yourselves, it is a gift of God, not as a result of works, so that no one may boast. For we are His workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand so that we would walk in them." So, one of the other sides of that is, as it said in this passage, we don't do these things so we can boast about what we do. And we have to be careful sometimes we don't fall into that category. We want to tell everybody what we've done. We want to tell people what we're doing. I think that's probably a human response. I think that's something that's this sort of humanity coming out of us. But we want people to know the good things we're doing. But most times people know what you're doing already. You don't have to tell them. And if they don't know, but when it does matter, it knows. Right? All right, one of the lessons. We were going to early today.
Well, I think going on with what you just said, the social media platform today has generated a platform for bragging rights. Everybody wants to get on there and brag about what they have, what they did, and I just see that all the time. I see that a lot in my grandkids, in their generation, great grandkids. It's sad.
And sometimes that line is so blurred to me. For example, I've told you before, I can't remember the guy's name now. I hadn't followed him in a while, but there's a guy that he helps homeless people in cities, and he has stuff in his vehicles, tents, drinks, food, umbrellas, whatever they might need. he approached me, see the homeless person, he pulls off and he helps them. He gives them the stuff, which in itself is great. And he puts it on YouTube. I really think not for himself, although I can see how that could end up being that construed that way. He puts it on YouTube because he's trying to raise some additional funds so he can do the things he's doing. He's putting it on YouTube so the people will donate, or he has stuff that he'll sell. He buys stuff in bulk or make stuff, and he sells that and uses that money to do these things. You have to be very careful there, that, in my mind at least, why you do what you're doing. What's he doing? Is he great? Yes. He's helping people? Yes. Is he helping people with detail? Yes. But again, you have to make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. All right. I have two questions. And these are, I guess, I don't expect a response, but I think we have to ask ourselves, do you serve God in order to be on his good side and be earning or deserving of salvation, or do you serve God out of a heart full of gratitude for his grace? God knows our hearts. He knows what we're doing and why we're doing it. Now, at the very end of that passage that we read, he says, this is something you'll see, Jesus says multiple times, so the last shall be first, and the first last. So the last shall be first, and the first last. My first question is, what does that have to do with this particular parable? What does that have to do with this parable? I know that they pay when the foreman starts paying everybody, they pay last first. And I said, well, is that why this is here in 16? Verse 16? But you read this passage in other places. This isn't the only time this is said, but it says in this passage, so the last shall be first, and the first last. Is there some significance to that verse being in this particular passage?
He's saying is, I think, you can't look at it that way. You can't look at it the way other people look at things. You have to look at it with spiritual eyes. Spiritualize those people that, on the face of it, may not be deserving, maybe more so.
Okay. Excellent point. Any other ideas?
Well, I think if you're first for the right reason, you wouldn't care whether you were last or not. You know, I don't know. I think it has a lot to do with why you're doing what you're doing.
I agree with that. You know, it's really, I guess one way I look at that is this. You know, I think part of what he's saying here is, whether you're first or last, you're still at the dead heat. You still are going to win. You still are going to get the reward. Now, again, when we look at this from this It doesn't seem fair, does it? When you think of a human standpoint, we can kind of understand why a guy that's making $100 million or somebody else gets 150, he's upset. That's crazy, isn't it? You got 100 million and you're upset if somebody's got 150 million? We can't hardly grasp that concept. But it happens. All the time it happens. Because that's the human nature of us. We see that as being, if I'm the best in my position, I should be paid as I'm the best in my position.
Yeah, the disciple says, we give up everything, what are we gonna get? You know?
Yeah. Goes back to that. You know, so even the disciples are saying, because again, remember, they're saying that this rich young ruler, and Jesus said, turn and walk away. And they're astounded. Why? How? If he can't get in, who can? And now Peter's thinking, what probably most of them are thinking, well, wait a minute. If the rich man can't get in, and we've been up everything, what are we going to get? And Jesus tells them, you know, you go back and read, he lays out for them what they're going to get. They'll sit on his glorious throne. When the Son of Man sits on the glorious throne, you also sit on 12 thrones, judging 12 tribes of Israel. But the reward is there for all of us. All right. Any other thoughts about the parable as a whole? All right. I don't have anything else to add. Next week, I think John Cook is going to start teaching. If not, I guess I'll be back another week. But I think John's going to start teaching next week.